It's the 10th turn. Four friends are sitting at the table, each of them controls a curia. Marco the Latin, Luca the Volscian, Andrea the Etruscan, and Davide the Sabine. The king is from the Latin curia, and a member of the gens Livia. The turn begins by checking if there are any rules that dictate whether chits should be added in the container and which ones. Since Rule 3.2 provides nothing for the 10th turn, they move on. The following chits have been drawn at the beginning of the turn: the Magister Populi, Equian War, Picenian War, Tribunus Populi, and lastly a Sabinian military unit. For now they'll stay in the minimap of Rome. Since the king's term ended in the previous turn, the players must immediately elect another one. In the game we call this procedure rogatio. As per Rule 5.2.1, each player proposes a candidate. Marco, which controlled the former king, is the first to roll a die, since his curia has the most influence points at the moment. He has a +1 modifier to his roll, but since his curia is also the one of the former king, his bonus gets cancelled by a -1 modifier as the rule dictates. Marco has rolled a 5. Then it's Davide's turn, who rolls a 6. Next Luca manages to score only 2. And lastly Andrea gets 3, and in a desperate attempt to change the outcome, spends 2 influence points to roll the die again, but scores 3 again. The new king is Sabinian, from the gens Valeria. Now the players must elect the Pontifex Maximus. The rogatio is slightly different from the one done for the king election. Each player chooses a gens from his curia. All 4 chits are placed in a container, and then players must randomly draw them. The first to be extracted is the king's favorite. The Etruscan player rolls a die with a +2 modifier. 4 + 2 = 6. Next a Sabinian is picked, which rolls a 4. Then it's the turn of the Volscian, which scores a 2, and lastly it's the turn of the Latin, which gets a score of 5. Spurius Tarquinius Velitrans, exponent of the Etruscan gens Tarquinia, obtained the role of Pontifex. The name has been attributed using the optional Rule 10.0 that you can find in the Solitaire rulebook. The first thing the recently elected Pontifex does is celebrating the inauguratio. He rolls a die, and the result is 3. The gods approve the election of the new king. Next the players proceed with the election of the leader of the Senate. The players do a rogatio once more, but this time with the purpose of electing the Senate. In this example, as per Rule 5.4.1, the rogatio must be done only amongst the curiae that have no king or pontifex among their ranks, which are the Curia Latina and Volscian. Marco, the Latin player, rolls a die with a +1 modifier, since he has the most influence points amongst the two. 3 + 1 = 4. Luca spends an influence point to get a +1 modifier for his roll. 5 + 1 = 6. The new Senate leader is Volscian. Now the king must assign to a gens the role of Magister Populi, his highest-ranking general. Since he can't choose among his own curia, as per Rule 5.5, he chooses the Latin curia. The player which controls the curia chosen by the king must select a gens which will play the Magister, and place the counter in the respective slot. The astutia and virtus values of the gens chosen will be the ones of the Magister Populi. Now the focus is the tribunus. His role is governed by the Senate. Luca, the player which controls the Senate, decides by paying 1 influence point to directly nominate the tribunus, as stated by Rule 5.4.3 in the first paragraph. He chooses the gens Apulia of the Volscian curia. He assigns him 2 infantry units, randomly picked from the minimap, and assigns him the objective of the turn: conquering the Volscian city of Satricum. But for doing so he must first roll a die for the authorization from the Senate. The result is favorable. This means not only that the war against the Volsci is approved, but also that the king shall not engage, for the duration of the turn, in wars against the Sabini, Latins, and Etruscans. He will be free to fight the factions that previously declared war to Rome, the Equi and Piceni. Then, in order to undermine the power of the king, Luca decides to nominate another tribunus, even if the chit hasn't been drawn with the ex officio procedure, as explained in Rule 5.4.4. For doing so he spends 2 influence points. He also wishes to nominate another one from the Volscian Curia, but he cannot do so since it's forbidden by Rule 5.2.2. A Curia can't control more than 2 offices during the same turn. Hence he nominates another tribunus from the gens Helvia of the Etruscan Curia. He gives him 2 infantry units also randomly picked from the minimap, and gives him a goal, to subdue the city of Artina. The king leaves Rome in the hands of his trusted magister and goes to personally lead military operations outside Rome with 3 infantry units and 2 cavalry units. Always randomly selected from the ones in the minimap. And with this last move the political phase comes to an end to make way for the military action phase.